Hey guys, how's it going? Lunar Complex here, and this is going to be a quite extraordinary video. I've finally been able to figure out how to do this, and it is transparent trees. So whenever the character goes behind a tree, you can't really see much, especially in the trees I use in my demo. See, my character's already lost. You have no idea where he is, and everything's gonna go to hell. And, oh, there he is. Oh, we lost him again. Who knows where he went. And so, a lot of you have been telling me that these big trees are kind of an issue. So I really didn't think I was able to do this, and I didn't want to kind of try and do anything about it because I just thought, you know, maybe people will get over it, but no, it does kind of bug me as well. But so these trees do not turn transparent when the player walks under them, or at least when you can't see most of the player. But I have indeed been able to make events that are completely independent from one another that actually turn transparent when the player walks under them. So if I walk under this tree right now, they turn transparent, and you could see everything under the tree. It's not a complete rectangle. If I step out here, it does turn back to the opacity goes back up, and if I decide to go back under it, so it is kind of this square right here, except I made a little exception to where if the player's in these four corners, go ahead and change the tree back to normal, because you can still see the player here. I see no reason in turning the tree transparent when you could see almost the whole entire character at this point. Now, there's a chest right here. So you see how this can bring a lot to a video game, where in this over here, you may only know that there's a chest here because you're just walking around and you just press enter a whole bunch, or you check game code or something like that, or I give it to you, or there's a hint or something. But this really opens up the game to where you can actually explore almost the whole entire map now, and actually see the entire map instead of just being blocked out by all these treetops here. So yeah, this tutorial is going to be about how to make all of your trees, or whatever you want to use, independently turn transparent whenever the player steps into a certain region based on the coordinates of the event. These tree events are right here at the root, and right here at this root, and I put impassibles at the sides of them. You could either do that with events by making them same as characters and just don't have them do anything, but I used Yanfly's region restriction, and it just doesn't allow the player to pass whichever region I decide to specify. Alright, so there is one image you will have to create on your own. Basically, it is the in the character sheet you have images here, and I made something called $!tree. And now anytime you have an exclamation point and a $, it's basically going to be 4 of these rows with 3 elements in each. And so what I did was I took the dimensions of this tree right here, and then multiplied the height of it by 4, so you could fit 4 here, and the width of it by 3. This whole sheet here is basically broken up into these 12 sections here by the exclamation point $, ahead of its image name. So all you really need to do is put the tree here that's not transparent, and then put whatever you want the tree to turn into right under it, or over here. It really doesn't matter, because on this second page, you're just going to select the new image. Other than setting up your image file, what you might want to use is, I'm sure everyone already has this, are Yanfly's plugins, and the plugin is region restrictions. So what this does is it allows you to block off sections of the map based on whichever region they are. If we right click your map, hit edit, and we type in this command right here, player restrict region 5. So what that means is any region that has a 5, the player cannot walk over at all. And if you may have noticed that I have an event restriction region is set to 1. If you're gonna make a game, you're probably gonna have this by default. You're gonna have to get it yourself, but you should really have this, because if you have NPCs that are outside that roam randomly, you're gonna want to set barriers, especially in houses if they roam randomly, because then what if they block off the exit of an entrance? And the exit of an entrance, okay, well, the exit of the place, or the entrance of the place. If they block that, that's bad. The player's stuck. You can't really do much except wait, or it's just bad game developing. And so you guys likely have this already. But like I said, if you don't, that's no problem, because you can just, as I said before, make an event here, set priority to same as characters, hit OK, and the player just cannot pass that anyway. So the first thing you should probably do is what I do in every single one of my games is create an event here, set to parallel, and what this event is going to do is turn on a main loop or game start switch. That is all it does. That's its sole purpose in life. And then it turns a self switch A on, and in self switch A, the event does nothing. It's a dead event. What this will do is if we go to database, common events, I named this common event main loop, and it is switched on by the main loop switch. So what this event over here does, or what it turns on, and the trigger is parallel. So anything in main loop basically is always going to run endlessly throughout the entire game. And what you're going to do is want to keep track of players' X and Y coordinates. So what you can do is just set a variable here. So I have player X variable is going to set to game data map X of player. And now you want to make sure it's map and not screen X, because map is everything outside the screen you can't see. Screen is everything only inside that screen right there that you can see. So you want to make sure you're recording players X map coordinate and also their Y coordinate. So every time, I believe this runs 60 times a second. I could be wrong. But basically this keeps running forever, and every single time that your player moves a certain direction on the map, it updates this, and it will keep track of the player's coordinates basically, which is very good. You always want to do that in any game you make. I'm not sure if they have some default way to get to the player's X and Y. I'm pretty sure they do, but that is just a very simple way and it works, so why not use it? After that, what you're going to do is create an event. Make sure the priority is same as characters, although it does not technically have to be, because this right here is the root of the tree, and I'm making it so that players cannot move on it. But also I'm putting a little bit of a redundant check here by also labeling its region 5 so that the player cannot cross it. So if you do not want to set this to same as characters, that's no problem as long as you put a region over it that the player cannot pass. I think the only changes to this event I made were set the image to just the regular tree, priority same as characters, and trigger parallel. Other than that, I believe everything is default. I'll get to this script later, but for now what you're going to want to do is copy this event page, paste it again, turn self switch A on, make sure the image here is the image you want when the player is under it, and as before, priority same as characters, trigger parallel. Alright, so for exactly what the code does, I'm going to just tell you guys that I will supply you with the code you need to paste into the script file in the description below for the first page of this event and the second page of this event. These are very long strings of code, and I will in this video go over exactly what every bit of that does. But right now, if you don't care about the coding part of this, this is basically all you need to know. So set the event up like this, and you could copy and paste this anywhere your heart desires, and just make sure you set places that the player cannot pass that make sense. So like these three sections of the tree down here, so just put that kind of over there. And if you play test this, you have all the trees you need. And what's really nice about this is that they all spawn into the game where the ones in the back up here are going to be behind whichever ones are in front over here. So it kind of makes things a little bit easier. So if I messed up, for example, with these trees, since they're just pieces of static images, if I place a tree here, it looks realistic. But let's say I wanted to put one back here. As you can tell, there's a little bit of graphical error happening here. So I'd have to like go over these trees and then finally this one to make that one back there actually work. But then there's another problem. With RPG Maker MV, you can only have a certain number of images overlap each other from the tile set, and that limit is 2. So as soon as I have this one tree back here and this tree over one square here or here, as soon as I add this tree on it or this one, it's just gonna erase the one that was put there the earliest. So this guy is gonna go away. So for example, if I have this image, then this image, as soon as I put this image up, it deletes the first one I put there. So you can only have an overlap of 2, which I think is just, it's kind of dumb. As soon as you place any sort of art, it should, you know, copy that art and put it there. So whenever you put something on top of it, all it does is change what the art is, and it doesn't have to record any layers. But since that's not the case, using these events actually does help a little bit more so than making your map by scratch of just doing whatever. Alright guys, so the next section of this video is going to be all about the code of how this works. And if you want this to work for building rooftops or any other thing, this might be something you want to try and understand. If you don't want to understand it, or if you don't care about it, by all means, just stop the video right here. This is just going to be jargon you probably won't understand. But if you're curious, then I will keep going on in this video. Alright guys, so in RPG Maker MV, the script command you can add into any sort of event commands is limited to only 10 lines. And as you can see, this if statement that I'm using for just one of the pages of the event is a lot more than 10 lines. And I did space it out a little bit just to help you guys see it, but it is above 10 regardless. So what I had to do was condense it all to one line, which is just deleting all of this space here and then just having it wrap around that way. So it was a little tedious. I had to keep fixing it in here and turning it all into one line, and then putting it into RPG Maker MV to see if it worked. And then when it finally worked, I was done and I was happy. So what we have here is a big giant if statement. This whole thing right here is one if statement, and what this does right here is it checks the player's x coordinate and compares it to the event's x coordinate multiple times, like multiple x columns, because when you're comparing just an x to another x, it applies for every single coordinate there is for y. When the player is here, for example, this is x coordinate 7. Up here is also x coordinate 7. It's basically just a very long column when you're comparing just x's. So if we look at this line right here, we have gameVariables.value 17. That is the 17th variable in the game, and that variable keeps track of the player's x coordinate, and we're checking to see if that is equal to the event's x coordinate. And I added a +0 here. So what that is basically doing is I kind of rewrote it into a kind of more English suitable language, to where we're basically just seeing if player x is equal to event x. That is what this line is here. So as soon as the player steps here, that if statement becomes true, and it does whatever code is inside the curly brackets. And the curly brackets are right here. And the code it does is it turns the event self switch A to true, which makes it transparent. So now that I've been able to kind of change the tree based on the x coordinate of the player in relationship to the x coordinate of the event, I thought, well, there's some tree parts out here. I need to kind of get those as well. I have this section here, and I'll worry about the excess later. But for right now, we have this section. It's working. It's fine. It's great. So what you do is you just copy and paste it a couple times. You put it together with some ors. So, for example, the player could be do the code inside the if statement if the player's x matches the event's x, so if I'm over here, or if I'm over here in this x right here. And to get that x, what we have to do is, for that one specifically, is since event x0 is right here, notice the +0. If we go 1 to the right, that's +1. If we go 1 to the left, that's -1. Now for y's, it's a little bit backwards in terms of its direction. So y negative is actually going up, and y positive is actually going down. For this spot right here, we need player x here is equal to event x here +1. So that is why we have a +1 here. So that gives us this column as well. So we just do, we compare the player's x with the event's x +1. We also compare it to the event's x +2, the event x -1, and the event x -2. And that gives us all of the x's that we need. So whenever the player is in any of this bit that is labeled 10, the tree will go transparent. I'm not worrying about if you just copy this code right here, because no, that's just what this is doing specifically in all of this together. Now, this code right here, the first line here is gameVariables.value 18, so that is the 18th variable in the game, which corresponds to the player y value. and we're seeing if it's equal to the event's y value minus 1. We aren't going to see if it's equal to events y minus nothing, so like just events y plus 0 or something, because we already want the character not being able to pass this part right here on the y-axis, on the events y-axis of y0. Because realistically, I'm not going to let a player in my game interact with these parts right here to walk on top of that. So we have to do minus 1. So if we look at a little bit of a simpler rundown of this, we have player y is equal to event y minus 1. So event y minus 1 is, since the event is right here, event y minus 1 is this line right here. So now if we add those together, we have the tree becomes transparent if the player is in any one of these 5 little sections of the cross here. So what I did before was, not only are we checking for if the player's y is equal to the event's y minus 1, we're going to do minus 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'm going to go ahead and add these values together and make it 23 because it just seems more interesting and fun to do. So now with both of these sections of code right here, if we just AND them together, so if the player is in any of these spots that have both 13 and 10, so if the x coordinate and the y coordinate satisfy the if statement, we're going to go ahead and turn the tree transparent. So if I'm standing right here, the if statement does not go through because it does not satisfy the and y conditions as well as the x. It only does the x. Likewise up here, it is not satisfying the and x or the x and the y, so it's only going to flip the tree transparency if we're standing within this rectangular section. Now, throughout my tutorial, you may have noticed that I added some blanks right here so that if the player ends up standing at any of these corners, I actually don't make the tree transparent. And to do that took a little bit of time and trying to figure out exactly how I would do that. But I did figure it out, and basically that is what this section does right here. To break it down a little bit more understandably, I took this whole part right here, the part that checks just the rectangle, including these 4 points, and like how we have to AND both of these sections together, both the horizontal y values and the vertical x values, I'm also going to AND another thing, and that's this group of code right here. Don't worry about the not for a little bit. What we're going to do is, if player x is equal to event x minus 2, so player x, so the vertical, is equal to event x minus 2, which event x is here, minus 1, minus 2, and we're going to see if it's equal to the player x right now. And in this line, it is. So that's good. There are 2 areas I need to worry about on this line right here. I'm only going to worry about one of the corners here. So player y is equal to event y minus 1. That is right here. We're going to AND those 2 conditions together with this AND right here, so that if both the player's coordinates and the event's coordinates displaced a little bit, so like over here, if those are equal and those satisfy the condition here, then that's great. But we want it to do the opposite of that. So if the player is there, we want not the code to go through. And that's why we have a not here. So if any 4 of these line statements are true, we're going to just flip that answer and go ahead and not go with the whole if statement. We're going to just not do anything. So that's kind of why and how it works, is because we're checking for when the player is here or here or here or here in relationship to the event, which is right here. And if those are true, we're going to flip it to become false so that it doesn't go through with the if statement, causing the tree to turn transparent. So that is what this whole section right here does. And I know some of you advanced programmers out there might be thinking, well, hey, if you have -1 through -6, why don't you just do a simple for loop and cut down on these lines of code right here? Well, I'm a little lazy for that. I know I can do it. It just take a little bit of time to figure out, maybe like a couple minutes, but it's just, it's easy to see, it's easy to understand. This section basically checks for the rectangular area here, and then this section checks for the corners, but then flips it to do the inverse of that. So it checks for the corners, but doesn't go through if the player's at those corners. And the code we're going to go through is, if the player is at any of these 23 points, we're going to go ahead and execute this code right here, which just tells the this event to on this map to switch its self switch A to true. And by doing that, we go to the second page here. But now we have to figure out how to get back. And I know this is bad programming, but with what we've already had, we had this guy set to true, but only if this whole if statement here worked. So if everything satisfied and became true, it would go ahead and execute the code here, just like it did up here, setting the self switch A to true. Well, what I'm going to do now is when the tree is transparent, which is when this code is running, I'm going to do nothing. That's why nothing was there. I'm going to do an else statement. If player is in where 23 is, that's fine. That's great. We're going to do nothing now. But as soon as the player doesn't satisfy those conditions, we're going to run the else program or the else code. And the else code just sets the self switch A of this event on this map to false. So it was a pretty easy way to figure it out, but I'm sure there are better ways to do it. But that is exactly how I did it. And if you were to use this for, say, a building rooftop or something, it'd be much easier unless you had diagonally kind of shapes and stuff. But you got your check for X lines, you got your check for Y lines, and you have your check for specific points. And with all that together, you can actually just do a little flip toggle and toggle trees transparency or roof transparencies. And yeah, guys, that is how I got these trees to toggle. And I really hope you guys enjoyed, especially my little tutorial on how to actually code the thing. I hope I explained that as well as I could. And I'll have the code pasted in the description, so all you have to do is copy paste it. If you want to mess with it, like I said, go ahead. If you have any questions about it, feel free to message me either privately or just on this video. And I hope you guys utilize this in your video game. It will definitely expand a lot of people's capability of what they can do. And if you don't actually want, I didn't actually put a barrier there yet. If you don't want the base of this tree to turn transparent to kind of show the player, hey, you can't pass this part either way, just change the image. Like, don't overthink things. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.